Danica?
Very busy morning this morning. A lot happening in regards to Ricky Stuart and his comments in the post-match press conference aimed at Jamin Salmon. Very explosive comments. What is the latest and how should the NRL be responding to what went on?
Yeah, well, we heard the statement that Ricky Stuart released earlier. I think you touched on that there. The NRL have got a big decision to make now because there's talk around potentially standing Ricky down for a game. Now, Ricky's had a history of fines. He's been fined a lot throughout his career. Now, the argument's going to be, has he overstepped the mark now where we get into talk about missing a game of football? It was a rather personal attack on Jamin. Now, the history between them, which he alluded to, is history between his son and Jamin. When they were kids, they were actually teammates playing footy. They went to school together and there were issues there with his son, and Ricky got involved. There was a game there, under 12s in the Shire, where Ricky came onto the field. Jamin's father was involved. They had to be separated. So there is history there. Does that justify Ricky then going on in a press conference and attacking Jamin Salmon the way he did? I think the NRL will argue that he doesn't have the right to. Now, as a father, I can understand that Ricky has these emotions around it, given what his son went through. But he would have been, I think it would have been better off going to Jamin in the tunnel and calling him the weak-gutted dog that he did call him, face to face, rather than going to a press conference. Would you agree, Reedy, that the fact that he did it in a presser?
Not saying to him at all.
You don't know, mate. Yeah, honestly, given the emotion where Ricky's coming from, I don't think you would want him to go in the tunnel with Jamin Salmon, to be honest, Mick, because
that would be more plausible, though. The fact if he did that behind closed doors to his face, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about it.
He's probably said that to him in the past, right? I'm sure that they've obviously come across each other, as you said, in Cronulla and over the years. Look, we all love that side of Ricky, right? The emotional side of him. That's what we love about him. He's so raw and emotional in press conferences. But there's a line you can't cross, and he crossed it. And the fact that he's come out and apologised, he knows he's crossed that line. I don't think it'll help him with the NRL. I mean, we see in the European soccer, the Premier League, coaches, managers get suspended from games and not allowed to actually attend the game. And you mentioned, Mick, Ricky's had a lot of fines. Probably hasn't stopped him in the past. The NRL's probably got to go that next step and actually ban him from going to a game.
The NRL are also in a delicate spot because they know the context of where it's coming from. And I'm not,
But Dave,
we're calling it issues, right? But the depth of those issues are what is concerning, and the NRL are aware of that. The NRL take steps to stamp those issues, which I'm not going to raise here, out of the game. And the NRL will factor that into whatever they decide to do with Rick. As Ricky said, he regrets it, absolutely regrets it. It's the wrong platform for it. He knows that.
Do you think, Peter V'landys has spoken before about when he came to the country as a young fellow, what he went through and being bullied, and he spoke about it in regards to whether he'd allow Israel Folau back into the game, and he's stood firm about the effect that bullying had on him. So he's very passionate about this. He's also, he's got a good relationship with Ricky Stuart, so it'll be interesting to see how much they factor the emotional side of this in regards to his ability to say what he did in a press conference.
I don't think you can. I understand it. I'm a father too. I've got two young sons, and I can imagine what Ricky went through at that moment when he got asked about Jamin Salmon. But there's a time and a place. Yeah. There's a line you cannot cross, regardless of what's happened in the past. And I have immense sympathy for Ricky and his son and what they went through in the past. But you can't bring it up in that sphere. It's just off limits. Right. You can't say that about a person in public like that.
It's an NRL post-match press conference. It's no matter what it was that went on and how traumatic it was for Ricky's whole family, you've got to separate your personal life from your work life.
And it's not the last we've heard of it either. Penrith are looking into their legal options with this and whether Jamin has a right to actually go down that path, because quite defamatory, the comments that were made.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that they will be taking action?
Well, I think they'll look at taking action. Whether they do or not, I'm not too sure. But they're exploring their legal options this morning. The club's not making any comment. Ivan even said last night in his press conference that he won't respond to those comments. So what happens behind the scenes in the coming days will determine whether Jamin wants to go through with it or not. Because
it'll dredge up the past, won't it?
It will.
For him as well.
It will.
Yeah. Ricky being the competitive coach that he is, I still feel like there's a factor of it was born out of disappointment by a significant loss for the Raiders last night. I know the issue is what the issue is, but that was a massive game for the Canberra Raiders at home with an opportunity against the Penrith Panthers side without their key halves.
If you look at the press conference, Dave, he was actually showed a lot of maturity, because they asked about that Fisher-Harris tackle, and he actually said, I hope he doesn't get charged. if he was clearly frustrated by the result, I think he would have said something differently. But he'd handled the loss pretty well when discussing Fisher Harris.
He was
quite calm, and I was surprised that he said, "I'd hate to see Fisher Harris charged," which we now know he's facing 2 to 3 weeks. But the Salmon conversation that ticked him off.
So if he does receive a suspension from the NRL, would that mean that he's just not allowed to go to a game?
Well, that's what happens overseas, Basically, you've seen guys like Jose Mourinho in the Premier League and Arsene Wenger and those, and Alex Ferguson, they've been banned from actually attending the game. So, they sit in a hotel room and they can still communicate with the team. But actually, I think they banned them from communicating with the actual team at the game as well. So, it'd be unprecedented.
It's a fair
It would be
punishment.
unprecedented, but it would send a message.
This standing down of the coaches is something the NRL is not solely coming off this issue. I know the NRL have been considering this process with an issue with a previous coach this year, where fines aren't changing what they're attempting to change. It's not having an impact, and they have been considering this left field punishment for some time. So this might be the turning point for them to drop it.
Because you can imagine, as a coach, the last thing you want to do is to not be with your team
at this point
at the
of the
game.
season.
Being able to
You're
exactly.
powerless.
Yeah.
It's not like in COVID when a coach has COVID and he sits there on the phone and communicates. You're actually banned from communicating with the team. So you actually have no influence over the result at all. So, it would be an extraordinary step because we've never gone down that path.
And I don't think there's a coach that would be impacted more. Ricky, he stands on the sideline.
Yeah.
He's the most, involved, animated,
emotionally charged
coach that we get to see on the sidelines.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on. A lot of news this week in regards to stadiums in New South Wales. Did the NRL get played by the New South Wales government?
Probably. Well, they have. I think they have, haven't they? And I think...
Look at the smile on his face. This Queenslander, he wants the grand final.
Well, I do want the grand final in Queensland. I'd love it up there. And sadly, it doesn't look as though it'll happen because I think Peter's come out and said, one party's obviously breached the deal. We don't want to be the other party that does the same. So they want to keep that previous agreement on foot. So I think the grand final will be here next year. But if they don't get their way down the track, I think it'll go to Queensland in the future. And I think that'd be great for the game. And I love the Super Bowl concept. Put it up for grabs. Put it up for the highest bidder. Share it around the country. I know people in Sydney think they've got a right to it, but the game's played outside Sydney, and a lot of the game is in Queensland, and they deserve to host grand finals.
Is that not a big ask, though, for families as well who want to go to the footy and then having to pay for, if they do it somewhere other than Queensland, so, somewhere where there's not necessarily a big NRL audience, that means families will have to pay for flights, accommodation. It's already expensive to go to the footy as is.
Well, I'm not saying every year. Saying, sure, if you do a Super Bowl concept, it moves around, every odd year, or you play every 3 or 4 years, you take it somewhere on the road. I don't think there's a big issue with that.
Suburban rugby league's the lifeblood of the game. We've seen that. It's where tribalism is born, and we hear the NRL talk about tribalism so often. The NRL and the New South Wales, the NRL has to try and get something out of the New South Wales government to fix these stadiums, because we've seen it in the last 48 hours. Sell out at Brookvale Oval, sell out at Shark Park. We've got Leichhardt Oval, one of the 3 stadiums that was promised funding. It's collapsed. Seriously. But at the same time, this is where what makes the game great. The tribalism in the heartlands and the suburbs is rugby league, not in big empty stadiums.
I feel sorry for Peter V'landys because people are attacking him for not reading the room here because Dominic Perrottet said that the flood victims need to support them. But it's his job to look after the NRL's. He's not there to do anything else but look after the NRL's interests. And the NRL's interest is for the government to follow through on the $800 million that they pledged to stadiums. Whether that's suburban grounds or ANZ Stadium or Core Stadium as it's known now, his job is to make sure to protect that. So criticism here, I think, is unfair.
Yep. I think a fair bit to play out on this one as well.
That went quick.
As always.
It did. There was a lot to discuss this morning.